Thank you for the welcome.
Yeah, start हो गया.
Oh, okay. Jai Gurudev, Swagatam. Welcome to all. Manish ji.
जी दीदी.
Sahana Bhavatu बोलना.
ओम सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनामधेतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै. ओम शांति शांति शांति.
Jai Gurudev.
No structure only draw here. It's your bad.
हाँ, मनीष जी अभी द्वितीय अध्याय में 52 श्लोका संस्कृत में एक बार करना पढ़ना.
जी दीदी. ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः. ओम यदा ते मोहि कलिलं बुद्धिर्व्यतितरिष्यति तदा गन्तासि निर्वेदं श्रोतव्यस्य श्रुतस्य च.
Jai Gurudev. Now I will recap what we have studied in the last session. In the last session, I have summarized the first chapter, and then we discussed 52nd verse of second chapter. And Manish ji just recited the Sanskrit shloka, which means in English, when your intellect crosses the mire of delusion, then will you gain indifference to what has been heard and what is yet to be heard. So this verse summarizes all that has been said so far in the second chapter. In earlier verses in second chapter, we have studied that the real state of yoga had been described. So what does yoga mean? Let us review a little bit. Yoga is a state that satisfies both the intellect and the heart. Yoga is the union of mind with the silence of Atma, with transcendental consciousness. When we transcend in meditation, we go beyond the finest level of thought and experience that silence in transcendental consciousness. It is also called as Atma. So, because of that experience of transcendence, there is no room for any doubt, because that is a state of jnana, that is a state of knowledge, that is a state of fulfillment, and it brings fulfillment to both intellect and heart. That was the problem Arjuna was going through. Though he had a highly developed intellect and highly developed heart, there was no harmony between them. So he was not fulfilled. He was going through a period of conflict. He didn't know what to do. But when Sri Krishna Bhagavan explains to him that yoga is a state of union, yoga is a state of fulfillment, then he begins to understand the value of transcending and the value of yoga. So in this verse, the importance is given to pure consciousness. When we transcend, what we experience is pure silence. It is pure consciousness. There is no mantra, no thought, no feeling. Just your awareness of who you are. And then, because it is a state of pure consciousness without anything else, and because mind and intellect are absorbed in that, they are uniting in that, we gain purity. Mind and intellect gain purity in pure consciousness. And this brings fulfillment of all the wisdom of life. Because when you hear something about truth and when you experience it, it confirms what you heard. And then you get this great sense of happiness. You read something in the scriptures, read something, you heard somebody say that, and now you experience it in your own meditation. And that gives a whole light into the field. You experience, it's like a flash of light, and you have this huge feeling, oh my God, now you have realized what you have heard or what you read in the scriptures or what you have read. And so this experience is superseded by the experience of reality. Hearing and listening is superseded by the experience of reality. So this experience of reality, experience of wisdom, knowledge is superior to what you have heard, and it makes you happy. So then now you are indifferent to all that you heard and all that is yet to be heard. So that is the discussion we had last time. So I'll say a few words in Hindi because in the course we had last week, many have requested Hindi, and I tried to speak in my broken Hindi, but still I was able to convey the meaning and they really enjoyed it. तो इसमें क्या हो रहा है, जब हम भावातीत होते हैं और अपने भीतर जो निशब्द साइलेंस का अनुभव करते हैं, उससे हमें ये तृप्त होता है, क्योंकि ये जो निशब्द का परिस्थिति है उसमें ज्ञान है, और जो कुछ भी हमने आज तक सुना है, शास्त्रों में पढ़ा है, वो सब हमको अवगत हो जाता है, हमारे समझ में आ जाता है, और हम बोलते हैं हाँ यही हमने सुना था, अभी हमको वो अनुभव हो गया है, कितनी आनंद की बात है। तो हम लोग तृप्त होते हैं, आनंद अनुभव करते हैं, तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है। तो इस परिस्थिति में जो कुछ भी हम सुने थे और या जो कुछ भी हम सुनने वाले हैं, उसका कोई बात नहीं, उससे अधिक हमको आनंद मिला, उससे अधिक हमको तृप्त मिला, हम तृप्त हो गए हैं। तो इस अवस्था में हम आ जाते हैं जब हम भावातीत हो जाते हैं। तो यही भावातीत ध्यान का अति उत्तम लाभ है, और उससे हम लाभ उठाते हैं, और भावातीत ध्यान से अब जो ये अनुभूति हुआ है, हम अभी उससे आगे चलते हैं। तो आगे चलने का क्या अर्थ है, अभी हम देखेंगे। So now we will move on. So what is the purpose of this experience of silence and having this feeling of fulfillment? So from here we move forward. So now let us see how this experience is the basis of what we are going to discuss now. So now that we have recapitulated what we have studied in the last session, we will begin discussion from verse 53, and we will see if we can cover 2 or 3 shlokas or 4 depending upon the time. So now we will begin with the verse number 53. Manish ji, 53 shloka द्वितीय अध्याय में पढ़ना कृपया।
जी दीदी। ओम श्रुति विप्रतिपन्नाते यदा स्थास्यति निश्चला समाधावचला बुद्धिस् तदा योगिमवाप्स्यसि। ओम
Jai Gurudev. When your intellect, bewildered by Vedic texts, shall stand unshaken, steadfast in the self, then will you attain to yoga. Vedic texts, this refers to verses 42 to 44. The Vedas expound the wisdom of right and wrong at various levels of evolution. They lay open the whole field of life, leaving a man to make his choice as to how he wants to proceed on the path of evolution. Therefore, it is quite possible that the mind influenced by Vedic learning, finding such a vast range of knowledge at its disposal, may become bewildered. But when once it has recourse to its own nature, the mind stands unshaken in this resolute state when it transcends the whole field of relative life. It gains self-consciousness or pure awareness. And when this pure state of consciousness is never lost under any influence, then yoga or skill in action is achieved. Vedic wisdom comprises various expressions of reality as seen from different points of view and taught by different schools of thought. These manifold theories are meant to satisfy the different levels of human understanding. The purpose of the Vedas being to enlighten people of all types. When one sees the different perspectives in Vedic literature, one may be confused by the difference of opinion about the path of realization. But when the mind comes to samadhi or transcendental consciousness, the goal of all paths is reached. This resolute state of mind is attainment stands completely clear, free from any confusion about the paths towards it. From the center of reality, the whole circumference of life is seen to be completely harmonious. For when the center is found, it becomes clear that the innumerable radii all converge from the circumference towards a single point. If the center is not found, then the various radii will be regarded as separate from one another with no common meeting point. That is why Sri Krishna Bhagavan stresses the importance of the direct experience of samadhi, pure consciousness. This alone can dispel the uncertainties of the mind. The purpose of the present verse is to strengthen the teaching given by Sri Krishna Bhagavan in 45th verse. It is in no way to refute the validity of the knowledge contained in the Vedic texts, without which intellectual satisfaction would not be possible. Scriptural knowledge becomes significant only once the reality has been directly experienced. Yoga here means skill in action as defined in verse 50. Sri Krishna Bhagavan makes it very plain to Arjuna that unless the mind first arrives at transcendental consciousness and unless the intellect is then unshakably established in the state of pure consciousness, that is to say, unless cosmic consciousness is attained, he cannot obtain yoga or skill in action. In order to understand more thoroughly how transcendental consciousness is compatible with the action and gives rise to skill in action, Arjuna in the following verse asks a very practical question. Jai Gurudev.
Okay. So, sorry, we don't have anybody to display what we are reading today. So that's why I hope all of you listen carefully to what Anita ji was reading. Now, I will explain a little bit what this shloka is telling us. So, in the verses 42 to 44 of this chapter, second chapter, we have learned that Vedic texts are Karma Kanda, which give the knowledge of disciplined and successful action. Second is Upasana Kanda, and they give the knowledge of connecting our mind with Atma, that is the transcendental reality, which was described in verse 45. That is Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, meaning go beyond the three gunas that we have studied. And that knowledge is given in Upasana Kanda. And this also fulfills the purpose of gaining true knowledge of life on experiential level. We get the experience of Atma by going beyond the three gunas. So this is explained in the second part of the Vedas, that is called as Upasana Kanda. Now the third Kanda, there are three sections. In the third Kanda, with all this knowledge, one can get bewildered. So Jnana Kanda tells us more knowledge, and with all this knowledge given in Karma Kanda, in Upasana Kanda and Jnana Kanda, one can get bewildered. There is so much when you read. Some people may go, oh my God, there is so much knowledge in there. But once you have the experience of ultimate reality, that is Atma, then one is free from confusion and becomes unshaken. That's what we have seen in the previous verse. It said, we have the experience of ultimate reality, that is Atma. And so we know by experience what this knowledge is. And so we don't get confused, even though there is so much written in the Vedas and some people read a lot. So if you have the experience of transcending and have the knowledge on a practical level, your own experience, then we don't get bewildered or confused. This is the resolute intellect we talked about. In the resolute intellect, resolute means one-pointed. When the intellect is one-pointed, it goes towards Atma. It goes towards pure consciousness. And then when we have the experience of pure consciousness, of transcending, again and again with our regular daily practice of meditation, then the silence gets infused into our daily activity. So we feel silent in waking state, dreaming state, and sleep states. Then we have reached a state of cosmic consciousness. And then whatever we perform is successful. And that is called in Sanskrita as yoga, karma, sukaushalam. That is skill in action. All your actions become successful because now you're operating. You pull the arrow back first, you develop potential energy, and then you release it. And so what happens? This arrow will hit the target because now you know the technique of successful action. And we have learned that that is the successful action. We get rest, we get into the state of silence, bring that silence into activity, then we act, then we are successful. So all this knowledge we have had studied in the past several verses. And so in this verse, what is emphasized is two things. That is, this Vedic knowledge that we get is not enough to give us this state of enlightenment. Just reading is not enough. So what this verse is telling, in addition to reading, we have to have the direct experience of Atma. That's where knowledge is, that's where fulfillment is. So the verse is not saying that Vedic knowledge is not useful. It is useful, but you cannot experience transcendence just by reading the books. So we transcend, we experience Atma, then you get enlightenment and you begin to rise in higher states of consciousness. So that is the point we have to remember. And the other point is, this Vedic knowledge is brought out in many different ways. There is a lot of Vedic literature, and there are a lot of people who are trying to explain this in different ways. So that can be confusing for some people, because everybody interprets Vedic knowledge from their own level of knowledge, from their own level of consciousness. And sometimes we don't know what level of consciousness they are in. And so it can be confusing sometimes. Some people even get turned off because they don't understand what this other person is trying to tell. But when we experience samadhi or atma or transcendental consciousness, the goal of all paths is reached. There is a saying in English, all roads lead to Rome, or something like that. So it is like all knowledge leads to Atma, but it is true when we have the experience of transcendence. Once you have the experience of silence of Atma, then you have this unshaken feeling. You are steadfast in the self, and then you will attain to yoga. So when Sri Krishna Bhagavan tells Arjuna that your intellect becomes steadfast in self, then this arouses Arjuna's curiosity. And so he is now beginning to think, what is this Sthita Prajna is? What does it mean when Sri Krishna Bhagavan says that your intellect is steady? So now in the next verse, he's going to ask that question, what is Sthita Prajna really? Please tell me. So, but before we get to that, I will try to say a few words in Hindi for the benefit of our Hindi speaking friends here. हम बोल रहे थे कि पिछले सप्ताह, उससे पहले in the past several sessions, हम लोग जब पढ़े थे 40 और 40 से 45 तक जो वर्सेस पढ़े थे, उसमें ये कहा गया था कि वेदास में 3 तरह के ज्ञान दिया गया है. उसको बोलते हैं कर्म कांडा, उपासना कांडा और ज्ञान कांडा. कर्म कांडा में ये बताया गया है कि अपना कर्म कैसे करना है, अपना किस तरह के कर्म करने से हम सक्सेसफुल होते हैं, वो सब कर्म कांडा में बताया गया था. और उपासना कांडा में ये बताया गया था कि ये योगा क्या होता है, ये योगा का अनुभव कैसे होता है. और हमने पढ़ा था कि निस्त्रैगुण्यो भवा, उससे हमको आत्मा का दर्शन हो जाता है. जब हम तीनों गुणों से परे हो जाते हैं, तीनों गुणों से परे होना का मतलब है भावातीत होना है. जब भावातीत होते हैं, जब वो निशब्द का अनुभव करते हैं, वो है योगा. उसको कहते हैं ट्रांसेंडेंस अंग्रेजी में, और हिंदी में बोलते हैं योगा. ये मन आत्मा में जुट जाता है, मन आत्मा में लय हो जाता है. तो तब जो अनुभव होता है उसको कहते हैं समाधि. थोड़े लोग समझते हैं समाधि केवल ये सन्यासियों का होता है, हम जैसे साधारण लोगों को समाधि लगना कठिन है, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है. महर्षि जी ने जो हम लोगों को भावातीत ध्यान का उपाय दिया है, उससे मन आत्मा में लय हो जाना अति सुलभ है, और हम सब लोग इसका अनुभव कर रहे हैं. तो ये सब ज्ञान उपासना कांडा में दिया गया है. और फिर जो ज्ञान कांडा होता है तीसरा,
उधर
वो तीसरा ज्ञान कांड होता
घर
है,
से बॉटल लेके आया करो।
उसमें और भी ज्ञान दिया गया है।
मीटिंग चल रही है हमारे इधर की। ओए
तो हाँ, मैं ज्ञान कांडा के बारे में बोल रही थी। हाँ, तो ये सब ज्ञान जब हम लोग पढ़ते हैं तो ये सब पढ़ने में कभी कभी थोड़ा कंफ्यूजन हो सकता है, सारी बातें समझ नहीं आएंगे शायद, तो उससे थोड़े लोग घबराते हैं और बोलते हैं ये वेद वेद ये सब मैं नहीं जानना चाहती हूँ, ऐसा भी सोचते हैं। तो श्री कृष्ण भगवान ये बोल रहे हैं कि जब हम आत्मा का अनुभव करते हैं, जहाँ अनंत शक्ति और आनंद और चेतना है, उससे ये जो पूरा कंफ्यूजन है वो सब चला जाता है। जब आत्मा का अनुभव होता है, ज्ञान मिलता है, और जो कुछ भी वेदों में पढ़े और जो कुछ भी समझ में नहीं आया है उससे हमको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, क्योंकि जो कुछ भी हम पढ़े हैं या उसका सिद्धि हो जाता है, हम उसको समझ पाते हैं तो आनंद मिलता है, और यदि वो समझ नहीं पाते हैं तो कोई बात नहीं, हमको तो इतना आनंद मिला है, इतना ज्ञान मिल गया है, तो हम तृप्त होते हैं। तो ये श्लोक का यही अर्थ है। तो जब कृष्ण भगवान बोलते हैं कि आपका बुद्धि जब आत्मा में लय हो जाता है, आत्मा से जुड़ जाता है, उसको कहते हैं स्थित प्रज्ञा, और तब आप ये अनुभव में दृढ़ हो जाते हैं। तो अभी अर्जुन को ऐसा लगने लगा, अरे ये स्थित प्रज्ञ क्या होता है, तो अगले श्लोक में वो पूछने लगता है। ठीक है, हम यही 1 मिनट रुकेंगे। अनिता जी, प्लीज एक्सप्लेन साइंटिफिक रिसर्च एंड देन वी विल टेक क्वेश्चंस।
Yes. So, Hemaji, as you have rightly explained, and how very well the scientific research relates to it, that when knowledge becomes significant, once reality has been directly experienced, and that experience is through Maharishi transcendental meditation, Shri Krishna Bhagavan here says that Arjuna, unless the mind first arrives at transcendental consciousness, then only you are in that unshakably established in pure consciousness. Now, what happens when your intellect stands unshakable, steadfast in the self? Then what happens? There is increased orderliness of the brain functioning. Why it is so? Because then you are in the state of restful alertness. And when you're in that state of alertness, automatically the outcome is increased stability in everything that you do. So it's a very beautiful connection of verse 53 with the steady intellect and how effectively and orderly your brain functions. Jai Gurudev.
Okay. Thank you, Anita ji, for nice explanation of scientific research. Are there any questions? कुछ प्रश्न है तो पूछना। ठीक है, तो कोई प्रश्न नहीं है, so we will move on to next shloka. Manish ji,
जी दीदी।
54, please.
जी दीदी। ओम अर्जुन उवाच स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भाषा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितिधिः किं प्रभाषेत किमासीत व्रजेत किम्। ओम
Jai Gurudev. Arjuna said, What are the signs of a man whose intellect is steady, who is absorbed in the self, O Keshava? How does the man of steady intellect speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? Arjuna's question shows that the discourse up to this point has been very clearly understood by him and that his mind is attuned to Sri Krishna Bhagavan's thought. Keshava, one with long hair, Sri Krishna Bhagavan. When Arjuna asked for the outward sign of the man of steady intellect, he addresses Sri Krishna Bhagavan by a name which refers to his outward appearance. Arjuna wants to know the distinctive characteristics of a man of steady intellect, both when he is deep within himself, withdrawn from activity, and when he is active. There are two ways of life, that of a householder and that of a recluse. Karma Yoga is the way of the householder, while Sankhya, the way of knowledge, is for the recluse. Both types of men achieve the state of steady intellect and, having attained it, rise above the limitations of life and of society. Their lives present a synthesis of individual and cosmic existence. The freedom that they live and the universal outlook that they hold inspire the society to which they belong. Their lives are an expression of those ultimate values which are the foundation of social values of all time. Wherever they are, busy in the marketplace or silent in a Himalayan cave, they are the guiding light of the human race. Arjuna asked for some signs, some distinguishing marks of such souls. Being a practical man, he wants to know the outward signs of a life of inner fulfillment. The question shows that his mind is clearer at this moment than it was at the beginning of this chapter when he could not think decisively. It also indicates the power of the teaching of Sankhya and Yoga to clarify a man's mind and raise his consciousness. Arjuna has been quietly listening to Sri Krishna Bhagavan. A discourse of 43 verses 11 to 53 has turned his state of suspension to thoughts of a concrete nature. No longer occupied with thoughts of sorrow, his mind now rises to ask about the practical aspect of the integrated state of life. And this transformation has taken place within 5 to 10 minutes, the time required to speak these verses. His question is answered in the following 18 verses, which present the characteristics of realized men who have gained steady intellect, whether by renouncing action through the knowledge of Sankhya or by way of Karma Yoga. Jai Gurudev.
In this verse, it is very, very clear and obvious that Arjuna now, his mind is into transformation because now he wants to know that what are the characteristics of an enlightened man. How he looks or how he talks and how he behaves. It is very much obvious that if we are into transcendental meditation, if we are into the cosmic state of consciousness, there has to be some difference in that person than the person who is not there. So now the question of Arjuna is, he is now wanting to know the distinctive characteristic. That means his mind is now being transformed and wanting to know Who is the man of the steady intellect? When he is deep within himself, withdrawn from activity, and when he is active, what is the difference? So Arjuna asks for the outward sign when he refers to Shri Krishna Bhagavan as the external appearance. So he wants to know that what the external appearance, how does it manifest? How does it come from the steady intellect? Now, another point that is explained here is because there are two ways of life. You have a householder's life, you have a recluse life. Now, the householder's life is guided by the Karam Yoga, and of the recluse also by the Sankhya Yoga. But the point to understand is both of them in their respective fields are of very high steady intellect, because both of them in their respective state present ultimate values of life. They are the guiding light of human race. So Arjuna now wants to know the outward sign of the inner fulfillment. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing that Arjuna wants to know, that what is the manifestation of the unmanifested self. And these points have been clearly mentioned in the scientific research when it says that whose intellect is steady, who is absorbed in the self. How does he absorb in the self? He comes to be absorbed in the self through transcendental meditation. And when he is absorbed in the self, then he has more clarity to the minor details that he goes through, because now he is working from the level of no stress. There is so much of independence that he feels within himself, because in that state of restful alertness, in that state of steady intellect, in that state of absorbed in self, the person becomes more independent, starts to have a broad comprehension of life, and develops a greater ability to focus attention on the right things. Why this happens? This happens because of transcendental meditation, when you reach that state of transcendental consciousness. Thank you, Jai Gurudev.
Thank you, Anita ji, for beautiful explanation of the verse and scientific research. Any questions? Or maybe we should say a few words in Hindi. Do you want to say, or shall I say? हाँ, तो अनिता जी बोल रहे थे कि ये श्लोक में अर्जुन पूछ रहे हैं, तो भगवान, ये स्थितप्रज्ञ क्या होता है, और ये जो आदमी स्थितप्रज्ञ स्थिति में पहुंच गया है, तो वो कैसे चलता है, कैसे बैठता है, कैसे बर्ताव करता है, उनका बिहेवियर कैसा रहता है, ये सब पूछने लगा। तो ये कहा गया है कि इसके कुछ बाहर को दिखाई देने में कुछ हमको ऐसा लगता है कि ये आदमी स्थितप्रज्ञ है, ऐसा पूछ रहे हैं। तो इसका जवाब कृष्ण भगवान अगले श्लोक में देते हैं। कुछ प्रश्न है क्या? एनी क्वेश्चन? कुछ प्रश्न है तो अभी ना? No question. So we move on to the next verse, 55. Manish ji, 55, please.
Om Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan आत्मन्येवात्मना तुष्टः स्थितप्रज्ञस्तदोच्यते।
Jai
ॐ
Gurudev. Sorry, Manish. Jai Gurudev. The blessed Lord said, when a man completely casts off all desires that have gone deep into the mind, O Partha, when he is satisfied in the self through the self alone, then is he said to be of steady intellect. Here, Krishna Bhagavan addresses Arjuna as Partha. This is to maintain the tide of love created by the use of the same word when he spoke to Arjuna for the first time on the battlefield. Now that the Shri Krishna Bhagavan finds Arjuna's mind thinking on a more practical level, he still wants the qualities of Arjuna's heart to remain at their height and not be overshadowed by those of the mind. The verse represents the steady intellect in the state of samadhi or transcendental consciousness, and also in the state of nitya samadhi or cosmic consciousness. In both cases, the mind gains the state in which is completely cast off all desires that have gone deep into the mind. When, through the practice of transcendental meditation, the mind gains transcendental consciousness, it is completely out of the field of desire. This is the steady intellect in the state of samadhi. How then is the steady intellect maintained in nitya samadhi when the mind established in pure consciousness is yet engaged in the field of action? Because in this state, the mind has become transformed into bliss consciousness. Being is permanently lived as a separate from activity. Then a man realizes that his self is different from the mind, which is engaged with thoughts and desires. It is now his experience that the mind, which had been identified with the desires, is mainly identified with the self. He experiences the desires of the mind as lying outside himself, whereas he used to experience himself as completely involved with desires. On the surface of the mind, desires certainly continue, but deep within the mind, they no longer exist, for the depths of the mind are transformed into the nature of the self. All the desires which are present in the mind have been thrown upward, as it were, they have gone to the surface, and within the mind, the finest intellect gains an unshakable, immovable status. Pragya is anchored in Kutasha. This is the steady intellect, the state of Nitya Samadhi, cosmic consciousness. Thus, the wavering intellect gains a very stable basis, and as a result, the field of activity is managed with great efficiency. It is quite wrong to think that one who has gained the state remains slumped in inertia and does not engage in action. This state of life is such that it maintains the freedom of the inner being, keeping it uninvolved with activity, and at the same time deals with all actions most efficiently and successfully. The word when is very important. It indicates that one is said to be of steady intellect only when one has gained transcendental consciousness, the state of separation from activity, or one has gained cosmic consciousness, the state where one naturally maintains self consciousness, even together with consciousness of the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states, and where the self or being remains unshadowed by any experience whatsoever. It is wrong to conclude that only a recluse who has been given up all worldly desires can attain this state of steady intellect. It can be gained by anyone through the practice of transcendental meditation. The recluse way of life does not necessarily produce a condition where a man completely casts off desires that have gone deep into the mind. The state described by the phrase has nothing to do with the particular way of Shri Krishna, is clearly referring to a state which one is free from desires and satisfied in the self. And this is easily attained by anyone who knows how to meditate and transcend relativity, whether he is recluse or a householder, whether he is to meditate in a place or in a cave. Jai Gurudev.
So there is 2 more pages, but we will pause here for a little bit because it's good to talk about the main points in this one. Then we will move on. So here, description of Sthita Prajna, that is a man of steady intellect, begins from this verse and continues in the next several verses. So it is said in this verse that Sthita Prajna happens in the state of Samadhi. Samadhi means transcendental consciousness. So Sthita Prajna happens in 2 states. One in Samadhi, that is transcendental consciousness. The other one is in cosmic consciousness. And another name for cosmic consciousness, that is in Sanskrita, it is called as Nitya Samadhi. So before we move on, let us review these words a little bit. Samadhi and Nitya Samadhi. And Samadhi, we just talked about how we experience the silence in meditation when we go beyond the 3 gunas. In that silence, it is pure consciousness. There is no mantra, no thought, no desires. Why? Because desire is a thought, and we are going beyond thoughts in transcendental consciousness. So in this state, there are no desires. So you have reached the state of desirelessness when you transcend meditation. So that is one state. Now, after we come out of meditation, we are doing whatever we are supposed to do, go to work or school or whatever, and then you are still experiencing this silence in waking, dreaming, and sleep states. So that samadhi is there always with you, that state of silence. So it is called as Nitya Samadhi, and that is cosmic consciousness. In this state, the mind has transformed into bliss consciousness. And when that happens, you are experiencing yourself as separate from activity, because you have gone beyond the thought. And when you have gone beyond the thought, the mind has merged in the Atma. So now you are Atma, and you're not in the realm of the 3 gunas. So when you experience the separation of Atma from the 3 gunas, you are away from the state of desires, because desires are in the relative and you are now in the absolute. So with this state, in transcendence, there are no desires. You reach the state of desirelessness. But what happens when you come out of meditation, you're in activity, then the desires come back. But they are on the surface level, and deep within the mind, there are no desires. Why is that? Maharishi explained. He said, because the depths of mind are transformed into the nature of the self. The self is written with capital S. The self, the Atma. Prajna. Prajna means intellect. This intellect is anchored to Atma, to Kutastha. There is a Sanskrit word for that. In this state, Kutastha means it is immovable. It is like a rock. that state of awareness is like a rock, it doesn't move. And so in that state, the intellect is anchored to this immovable quality of Atma. So because in the deep level, we are merged and established in that state of immovability, in the deep level, there are no desires. And if there are any desires, they are only on the surface level. So in this verse begins with the word when. It says, when the mind settles down, when you experience transcendence, when you experience cosmic consciousness, then you reach a state of desirelessness. So only after experiencing transcendence and being in cosmic consciousness, you are able to reach a state of desirelessness. Before that, you're always having desire and you're caught up in this cycle of desires, action, impression, actions like that. So that is why that word when is important. When means after we get established in silence of Atma and after we are in cosmic consciousness. And the other important point to remember is, it is wrong to think that only a recluse or a sannyasi who had given up all worldly desires can reach a state of sthita prajna or steady intellect. Because some people may think that samadhi is difficult to experience for ordinary people like you and I. It is only for sannyasis because they are doing tapas all day and all that. So they are able to experience samadhi, but not ordinary people like that. But Maharishi says, no, not at all. Even householders like us, we are regular, normal, ordinary people. But when we do transcendental meditation, we transcend and we experience samadhi. And we are very grateful for this beautiful technique. It is simple, it is easy. We experience transcendence and we are experiencing samadhi. Samadhi is another word for transcendence. So everybody who does TM and transcend, they can have samadhi. So when we reach this state of desirelessness, we are free from desires. How we become free from desires is because we are satisfied in the self. We are happy and content. In the verse it says, Atmanyevatmana tushtaha, which means your happiness comes from your Atma. In Atma, you are happy. It is called as Atmananda. This Ananda, this happiness is inside of you, inside your Atma. You don't have to depend on anything outside of yourself for your happiness, because outside happiness comes and goes, but inner happiness stays with you all the time. So this is the beauty of getting to this state of sthita prajna. Thoda Hindi mein bolti hu. I'll say a little bit in Hindi and then we will move on. So अभी हम बोल रहे थे कि ये जो स्थित प्रज्ञा का अनुभव होता है, ये दो तरह के परिस्थिति में होता है. एक है जब हम भावातीत होते हैं, आत्मा का दर्शन करते हैं, उस परिस्थिति में कोई विचार नहीं है, सब निशब्द हैं और वहां मंत्र नहीं है, वहां कोई विचार नहीं है, कुछ अलग चीज का अनुभव नहीं है, केवल शुद्ध चेतना है. उस शुद्ध चेतना में कोई भी कामना नहीं होती है. तो उस अवस्था में कामना की कोई पॉसिबिलिटी नहीं होती है, क्योंकि आप विचार से अतीत हो गए हैं. तो वो एक परिस्थिति है. दूसरी परिस्थिति ये है कि हम भावातीत ध्यान से बाहर निकल के आते हैं, तब हम अपने ऑफिस जाते हैं या कॉलेज जाते हैं, पढ़ने जाते हैं, ये सब करते हैं, तो उस समय में ऐसा लगता है कि ये जो विचार, ये कामना है, ये वापस आ जाते हैं, लेकिन ये विचार सुपरफिशियल लेवल में ही रहते हैं, भीतर, बहुत भीतर अंदर नहीं होते हैं, क्योंकि भीतर ये मन अपने आत्मा से जुड़ गया है, वहां तृप्त है, और वहां तक कामना नहीं पहुंचता है। तो इसी कारण भीतर कामना की कोई ये नहीं होती है। जो कामना होता है वो ऊपर ऊपर ही, सुपरफिशियल ही होता है। और कामना क्यों नहीं होता है? इसका कारण है कि हम आत्मा का अनुभव करते हैं, वहां आनंद मिलता है, उससे हम तृप्त हो जाते हैं। तो जब आपको जो चाहिए वो आनंद मिल गया है, तो और दूसरी चीज की कोई कामना नहीं होती है। इस तरह हम कामना रहित परिस्थिति में पहुंच जाते हैं। कोई प्रश्न है तो अभी पूछ लेना। और ये भी कहा गया है कि कई लोग समझते हैं कि समाधि लगना कठिन है। ये सन्यासी लोग जो हिमालय चले जाते हैं, वो लोग लंबा तपस करते हैं, लंबा ध्यान करते हैं, केवल वही लोगों को समाधि मिलती है। लेकिन महर्षि जी ने हमको इतनी अच्छी भावातीत ध्यान का उपाय दिया है, सब लोगों को समाधि लगती है। जब हम भावातीत होते हैं, समाधि लग जाती है। तो ये बात बहुत प्रधान बात है, इसे हम याद रखना। हम सब लोगों को समाधि लगती है जब हम भावातीत होते हैं। तो ये ऐसा नहीं सोचना कि केवल बैरागी लोगों को, सन्यासी लोगों को समाधि लग जाता है। तो कुछ प्रश्न है? एनी क्वेश्चंस? अदरवाइज वी विल कंटिन्यू रीडिंग। अनीता जी? Anita ji, unmute and read, please.
Oh, sorry. Shankara, the great exponent of the philosophy of integrated life, says in his commentary on this verse, by direct experience of the blissful nectar of the transcendent reality, the steady intellect holds itself absolutely without anything other than itself. And again, he defines the man of steady intellect in the following words: he whose intellect, born of realization of the distinction between the ultimate and the non-ultimate, is settled, he is a man of steady intellect. The intellectual understanding gained by the analysis of and discrimination between the ultimate and non-ultimate aspects of life does not produce the state of steady intellect. Such practices, remaining as they do on the level of thinking, can at best create moods of mind. This certainly will not produce the state of mind called steady intellect. This results only from the direct experience of pure consciousness to such a degree of clarity that the difference between the ultimate and the non-ultimate is clearly recognized and appreciated on the intellectual level as well. Thus, Shankara plainly holds that this state of steady intellect is produced by the practice of transcending relativity as expressed in the verse 45, and not by merely spinning words about it or merely trying to understand it. The process of experience is very different from that of intellectual discrimination of reality and non-reality. This should be sufficient to remove the misunderstanding created by commentators or translators of the Bhagwat Geeta who hold that the steady intellect can only be gained by recluses, a view which is responsible for spiritual decadence in modern society. Unfortunately, Shankara's own view has been misinterpreted by commentators who undertook to propagate his philosophy. They seem to have missed the central part of the spiritual life, transcendental consciousness, and the direct way to its realization. As a result, everything which aimed at clarifying the process of transcending has been held to belong to the path of renunciation and attributed to the recluse way of life. This lack of insight into principle casts the center of spiritual life onto the recluse order, thus debarring the householder from the gain of spirituality and throwing the whole of humanity out of point. This verse does not record any outer sign of the man whose intellect is steady and who is established in the self, because there cannot be any outer sign to show that a man is absorbed deep within himself. The inner state of such a man cannot be judged by outer signs. It cannot be said that he sits like this or like that, or does his eyes close in any particular manner. No such external signs can serve the criteria of this state. A man may sit in any style and go deep within himself and be in bliss consciousness. It may be said that when someone goes into samadhi, his face becomes serene and more glowing. But this is not something that can be gauged by any fixed standard. For this reason, Shri Krishna Bhagavan does not enter into any such description. The signs recounted here are only subjective. They concern the inner condition of the mind as indicated by cast off all desires and is satisfied in the self. This verse brings to the light the basis of a steady intellect, the realization of being in transcendental consciousness or in cosmic consciousness. The next verse presents the nature of the man who has gained steady intellect. Verse 57 describes the nature of attachment. Verse 58 explains the nature of his activity in this state. His senses are withdrawn from their objects. And finally, verse 59 points to the influence of the unseen on the steady intellect. It shows that their taste for these objects vanishes when the Supreme unfolds itself to them in its unbounded grandeur, when the Supreme comes to be lived on the sensory level of existence. These 5 verses taken together reveal the essentials of the steady intellect. Jai Gurudev.
Okay. So now let us see what Adi Shankaracharya said about this shloka. He said that by direct experience of the blissful nectar of the transcendent reality, the steady intellect holds itself absolutely without anything other than itself. In Sanskrita, it is said, Paramartha Darshana Amruta Rasa Labhena Anyasmad Alam Pratyayavan Sthita Prajna. Very beautiful statement. So he's saying, when we have the direct experience of the Amrita, the blissful nectar of Atma, that is the transcendental reality, then what happens? The intellect automatically gets steady in that one because it's a beautiful experience. It is blissful. It is nectar. So once intellect experiences that very easily without any problem, it just hangs on to that state of awareness without any other thing. So that happens automatically because you have the taste of it, you just get stuck there, something like that. And in another expression, he says that this realization, it comes from the realization of difference. One realizes the difference between Atma and Anatma. What is real? What is unreal? What is ultimate reality? What is not ultimate reality? So when you have this discrimination, then you know that that person is in having a steady intellect, because intellect is the one which discriminates between right and wrong, real and unreal. And so once they have this understanding also, in addition to the experience, then one becomes Sthita Prajna. The Sanskrita expression of this statement is Sthita Pratishtita Atmanatma Vivekaja Prajnayasya Saha Sthita Prajna. Sthita Pratishtita Atmanatma Vivekaja Prajnayasya Saha Sthita Prajna. So these are the two statements from Shankaracharya, very beautiful. And Shankaracharya is making a very important point here that we have just discussed, what Maharishi said, that intellectual understanding does not produce steady intellect. Only direct experience of pure consciousness, transcendence, produces steady intellect. So in this verse, we are learning that the basis of steady intellect. What is the basis of steady intellect? That is realization of Atma, realization of pure consciousness, one in transcendence, in meditation, and also in Jivan Mukta state, that is in cosmic consciousness. So I will say a few words in Hindi and then I'll take questions. So शंकराचार्य ने बोले थे कि जब मन आत्मा में बैठ जाता है तब अमृत का अनुभव करता है, वहां इतना आनंद है, ये जो मन बुद्धि ये आनंद का अनुभव करता है तो इतना अच्छा लगता है कि वहीं रुक जाता है, वहीं चिपक जाता है। वैसा चिपक जाने के लिए और कुछ भी नहीं चाहिए, वो खुद ब खुद वहां बैठ जाता है। तो ये एक अर्थ है, ये एक स्टेटमेंट है। फिर शंकराचार्य ये भी कहे थे कि जब बुद्धि विवेक से जो क्या सच है क्या सच नहीं है इसका विचार करता है, उससे भी ये स्थित प्रज्ञा हो सकता है, क्योंकि हम देख रहे हैं ये नश्वर जगत में क्या है, ये तो नश्वर है, आज है कल नहीं होएगा, लेकिन ये जो शाश्वत जीवन है, शाश्वत सत्ता है, उसको कहते हैं सत्य, उसको अंग्रेजी में बोलते हैं रियल, वो है शाश्वत, इटर्नल भी बोलते हैं। तो जब हमारा बुद्धि इसका विवेक से समझने का प्रयास करता है और ये दोनों में सत और असत में सही क्या है, नश्वर क्या है, जब बुद्धि ये समझता है उससे भी हमको लाभ होता है और हम ये समझ सकते हैं और अनुभव कर सकते हैं कि ये शाश्वत सत्ता में, विशुद्ध चेतना में शाश्वत आनंद है। तो यही बात शंकराचार्य जी बता रहे थे। तो now I will take any questions. First scientific research and then we will have questions. Please, Anita ji.
So, yes. So in this verse, we have been reiterating and again laying emphasis on the inner condition of mind as indicated by the cast of all desires. And then you are satisfied in the self. Now, when you are satisfied in the self, through Maharishi's transcendental meditation, reaching the state of transcendental consciousness, then you alone have that state of steady intellect where you develop that high feeling of a good self-esteem. Your own self is raised. Why it is raised? Because now you are established in that intellect where you are one with your own self. And what happens when you are one with your own self? Then definitely there is increased inner well-being. And when there is increased inner well-being, definitely we are very happy. When we are very happy, then we start accepting ourselves and others from that level of steady intellect. And then what happens? Then we are in a very good position where we can perform well, where we can see things in its right perspective. So the scientific research says, with the establishment of steady intellect, there is great independence, great happiness, great inner well-being, and improved performance in every sphere of life. Jai Gurudev.
Thank you, Anitaji. Any questions? Please go ahead now. कुछ प्रश्न है तो अभी पूछ लेना. Okay. कुछ प्रश्न नहीं है. Manish ji, did somebody say something? Okay. Manish ji, अभी 56 और 57 दोनों श्लोकों का पढ़ना.
दुःखेषु अनुद्विग्नमनाः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते यः सर्वत्रानभस्नेहस्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नाभिनन्दति न द्वेष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Jai Gurudev.
धन्यवाद मनीष.
Jai Gurudev. He whose mind
Himabindu,
is
did you want to say something? No. Himabindu, we will stop here because we will stop discussion here because we have just 15 minutes left. We will do group meditation for 5 to 6 minutes, and then we will have Parayana, and then we will end the session. So we'll continue with the next shloka in the next session. So let us all sit comfortably and do meditation for a few minutes. Never mind the time. I will say Jai Gurudev, and after that we will have second chapter Parayana. Okay, let's begin. Jai Gurudev. Take a minute or so and slowly open the eyes. Slowly open the eyes. Now, Maharishi will do the Parayana. 37
जी दीदी।
आखिर तक करना।
ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। सशंख चक्रम शखरेत कुंडलम सपीत वस्त्रम शिरसेरुहेक्षणम सहस्रवक्षस्थल कौश्रिवश्रियम नमामि विष्णुं शिरसा चतुर्भुजम्। श्री परमात्मने नमः। हतो वाप्य प्रपास्यसि स्वर्गं हतो वाप प्रपास्यसि स्वर्गं हित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम्। तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः सुख दुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि। एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये बुद्धिर्योगे त्विमां शृणु। बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि। नेहाभिक्रमनाशोऽस्ति प्रत्यवासो विस्तृत्यवायो न विद्यते। स्वल्पमप्यस्य धर्मस्य त्रायते महतो भयात्। व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिर् एकेह कुरु नन्दन बहुशाखा ह्यतन्ताश्च बुद्धयो व्यवसायिनाम्। यामिमां पुष्पितां वाचं प्रवदन्त्यप्यपश्चितः वेदवादरताः पार्थ नानदस्तेति वादिनः। कामात्मानः स्वर्गपरा जन्म कर्म फलप्रदां क्रिया विशेष बहुलां भोगैश्वर्य गतिं प्रति। भोगैश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां तया प्रहत चेतसां। व्यवयासात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते। त्रैगुण्य विषया वेदा निस्त्रैगुण्यो भवार्जुनः। निर्द्वन्द्वो नित्यसत्त्वस्थो निर्योगक्षेम आत्मवान्। यावानर्थ उत्पाने सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावान् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्राह्मणस्य भिजानतः। कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूर्मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि। योगस्थः कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय। सिद्ध्यसिद्ध्यो समाभूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते। दूरेण ह्यवरं कर्म बुद्धियोगात् धनञ्जय। बुद्धौ शरणमन्विच्छ कृपणः फलहेतवः। बुद्धियुक्तो जहातीह उभे सुकृतदुष्कृते तस्माद्योगाय युज्यस्व योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्। कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्त्वा मनीषिणः जन्मबन्धविनिर्मुक्ता पदं गच्छन्त्यनामयम्। यदा ते मोहि कलिलं बुद्धिर्व्यतितरिष्यति तदा गन्तासि निर्वेदं श्रोतव्यस्य श्रुतस्य च श्रुति प्रतिपन्ना ते यदा स्थायसि निश्चल यदास्यति निश्चला समाधावचला बुद्धिस्तदा योग्यमवाप्स्यसि। अर्जुन उवाच स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भाषा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितधीः किं प्रभाषेत किमासीत् व्रजेत किम्। श्रीभगवानुवाच प्रजहाति यदा कामान् सर्वान् पार्थमनोगतान् आत्मन्येवात्मना तुष्टः स्थितप्रज्ञस्य तदोच्यते। दुःखेषु निर्विघ्नमनः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते। यः सर्वात्रानविनश्यन्स्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नाभिनन्दति नाद्वेष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता। यथा संहरते चायं कूर्मोऽङ्गानीव सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणेन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता। विषया विनिवर्तन्ते निराहारस्य देहिनः रसवर्जं रसोऽप्यस्य परं दृष्ट्वा निवर्तते। यततो ह्यपि कौन्तेय पुरुषस्य विपश्चितः इन्द्रियाणि प्रमाथीनि हरन्ति प्रसभं मनः तानि सर्वाणि संयम्य युक्त आसीत् मत्परः। वशे हि यस्येन्द्रियाणि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता। ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः संगस्तेषुपजायते संगात् संजायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यते। रागद्वेषवियुक्तेस्तु विषयानिन्द्रियश्चरन् आत्मवश्यैर्विधेयात्मा प्रसादमधिगच्छति। प्रसादे सर्वदुःखानां हानिरस्योपजायते। प्रसन्नचेतसो ह्याशु बुद्धिपर्यवतिष्ठते। नास्ति बुद्धिरसयुक्तस्य न चायुक्तस्य भावना न चाभावयता शान्तिर्शान्तस्य कुतः शुभं शान्तिस्य कुतः सुखम्। इन्द्रियाणां हि चरतां यन्मनोनुविधीयते तदस्य हरति प्रज्ञां वायुर्नावविभां वशे। तस्माद्यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणेन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता। या निशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यां जागर्ति संयमी यस्यां जागृति भूतानि सा निशा पश्यतो मुनः। अपूर्यमाणा मचलप्रतिष्ठं समुद्रमापः प्रवसन्ति यदुवत् तत्वत्यकामां यं प्रवसन्ति सर्वे स शान्तिमाप्नोति न कामकामी। विहाय कामान्यः सर्वान् उपाश्चरति निःस्पृहः निर्ममो निरहङ्कार स शान्तिमधिगच्छति। एषा ब्राह्मी स्थितिः पार्थ नैनां प्राप्य विमुह्यते स्थित्वा शामन्तकालेऽपि ब्रह्मनिर्वाणमिच्छति। ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे साङ्ख्ययोगो नाम द्वितीयोऽध्यायः। ओम श्री कृष्णार्पणमस्तु। ओम जय गुरुदेव।
जय गुरुदेव। धन्यवाद मनीषी। अभी शांति पाठ कर।
हरे ओम माधो शांतिरन्तरिक्षगुं शान्तिः पृथिवी शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिः वानस्पतायाः शान्तर्विश्वे देवाः शान्ति ब्रह्मा शान्तिः सर्वगुं शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः सामा शान्तिरेधि यतो यतः समीहसे ततो नो अभयं कुरु शन्नाः कोरपराजाभ्यो पायन्नाः पाशवयाः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः जय गुरुदेव
Jai Gurudev. Now let us all come on video and say Jai Gurudev to Maharishi ji together. Jai Gurudev. Thank you,
Jai Gurudev.
Himabindu and Anita ji for reading, Manish ji for reciting, Jai Gurudev Bani and Jai Gurudev Gita. Hope all
Jai
your
Gurudev. Jai
Jai
Gurudev Himaji.
Jai Gurudev Anita. Thank you. So we'll meet again next week, same time, and we will continue.
Okay.
Verse 56. Jai Gurudev. I'll end the meeting now.
Take good care.